Hi, my name's Kat. I was going to be performing at the Saboteur Awards along with a whole load of other performers, but obviously the world has changed a bit since then. So instead, we are all in our separate little geographical bubbles, and you are currently in my kitchen because my bedroom is too untidy to invite you into and feels too personal, even though you are going to be entering poetry space, which is way more intimate, but because it's transmuted through art, somehow it's not so tender. So instead of what you were going to get, which was a curated 30-minute extract of my spoken word theatre show, you're going to be getting a couple of extracts of that show and then also some poems on top. I'm going to try and do it in one take, but we do have builders next door and housemates and other people next door. So depending on noise and interruptions, we will see what we can do. But that is the way of things. So about the show. Dry Season was it will still tour, is a spoken word theatre show that explores identity and change, ideas around aging and dealing with loss, looking at those things through the prism of my own personal experience with premature menopause. So obviously pulling in dialogue around gender and identity and biological issues and health and mental health and things like that. So this poetry set, as well as having the extracts, also has thematically linked poems in it that aren't in the show but sort of deal with similar or related issues. So that gives a bit of context to what you're about to see, witness, experience. And also I get to wear my pink jumpsuit, which was part of the show and which I bought with Arts Council money as costume. Thank you, Arts Council. And now I'm making the most of it by wearing it for this. So there we go. Not all bad. So, shall we begin? Let me tell you a story. It's about a girl. This girl has hair as pale as hay and skin like fallen snow. She has skin as dark as walnut juice and hair black as a crow's wing. Sometimes she grows it long and lets it down for princes to climb. Sometimes her long bright hair, too beautiful hair catches the eye and sags on the thorns of powerful men. Sometimes she twists free. Sometimes she goes exploring. She is uncharted territory. She is the woodcutter's daughter, the miller's daughter, the merchant's daughter, the magician's daughter, the king's daughter. To be honest, it doesn't really matter whose daughter she is as long as she is accounted for. She is so beautiful that the stars want to touch her. She is plain but good-hearted, dutiful and pious, quick-witted and bold. She will gamble away her birthright, shed her shining tail and walk on knives for a chance at love. She is foolish and will not be told. She wears dresses sewn with pearls. She wears her brother's clothes. She veils her skin. But no matter what she wears, she always wears too little or too much. She is always too big or too small. She is always too hot or too cold and never just right. She wears sackcloth and ashes, goes barefoot, runs from the party at midnight, limping, lopsided in her single mirrored shoe. She hides her face and buries her name. She buries her treasure. One day she will bury her dead. She wraps herself in scarlet, and she walks into the wood to talk to wolves. And she walks through the world and through the stories, and she turns her unlined face towards the future, and she is young, and she is young. And she is always young. And when she's not, after the kissing, the dancing, and the wedding, The chairs are up on the tables now, and the guests have staggered home drunk on novelty. And she's barely out of the oven, and already she's getting stale. This next piece is called Definitive, and it's also from the show. 1. Etymology. From the Greek periodos, originally used in Middle English to describe the time taken for an event or incident to be completed or to end. For example, an illness. You didn't tell me you were leaving. Or maybe you did, but not loud enough or clear enough. Or you spoke in a foreign language so I didn't understand and I kept waiting for you. Any day now. Any day now. Any day now. Till it was clear you'd gone. 2. A noun. A measure of time. For example, she experienced regular periods of depression. If I'd have known, maybe I'd have done things differently. Thrown a party, opened a bottle of the good stuff, red, of course. Shown my appreciation in libations and burnt offerings, your presence sweetened by your absence waiting just behind the door. But probably not. You were always a bit of a pain, and I've always made shrines for memories. The past is fat, flickering candles, communion wafers melting on my sacrilegious tongue while time skipped by. Inhaled casually, tossed into my gasping mouth like popcorn, slipping through my prayer-distracted hands. 3. Adjective. From or displaying typical attributes of a past historical time. For example, a well-preserved period house in need of attention. The door is locked now. And the doctor said my horse had bolted long ago. I never heard the hoofbeats. Guess I wasn't listening. Maybe I thought it was rain or distant thunder, or another nature-based symbol of my inherently earthy feminine sensuality, which is so wild it can apparently only be properly encapsulated in a constant flow of Facebook memes featuring sunsets, mountains, and older white women looking pensive in autumn-coloured wool. Or maybe I had my earphones in, deliberately, ostentatiously, like I do when passing building sites or groups of men on corners. 4. Informal. Used in conversation to show that any further discussion is undesirable and will not be entered into. For example, this conversation is over now. Period. Your lack resonates louder than that clock I never heard. I ignored the lunar tug that snagged and caught, and finally unravelled from inside my labyrinth that bloody skein. It happens. We wear down gradually. Expose the bedrock of our biology. Beneath it we are small, soft, pale from unaccustomed light. We curl into ourselves and squint, waiting to adjust to the glare, the empty space. 5. Grammatical. A punctuation mark. A full stop. So this next one isn't in the show, but it's about a symptom that I deal with a lot in the show, which is insomnia, which affects over 50% of everyone that goes through menopause and is currently affecting a lot of the general population. As all of our sleep patterns go haywire and our anxiety levels go through the roof. And I thought that this was potentially a little bit more relatable now than it might be at other times. So it's about insomnia and it's called Symptom. This sleepless world holds life at arm's length, blunts edges, turns the volume down to an irritating insect hum. Grey filters overlay my days and render them blurred, un-Instagrammable. Even in dim light, I'll never pass for 25 again, and I do not languish photogenically. Red eyes smudged with lingering shadows tell my story on repeat as I attempt a gloss of continuity, echoing student subterfuge, that mirrored throw to smooth over the mess. For years I got my fix. Was found at parties, crumpled like a fiver down the back of the sofa, in spare bedrooms under coats, oblivious to the tangled strangers. Once in New York, beneath a pool table in a pop-up bar, neatly fetal, green hair spread and soaking up the beer from the fashionable concrete floor. Often by fires, sometimes on benches, always in my lover's laps, that readiness to flay myself, leave conceit and consciousness puddled on the floor like dirty underwear. Diving into trust, a hand light at my nape, warm anchor to the world. It has been too long since I slept skin to skin, even Morpheus avoids me now, and in the limbo night I wake stifled by the weight of others' dreams. 3 a.m. Housemates spoon above my head. From one side the unseen stoner neighbours mutter, from the other come the small bird cries of old lady next door. Our paths cross rarely, though I hear her shouting at the nurses through the walls. Night softens her. Hello, she calls. Hello, she calls. Hello. Dementia gently tugs her hand and doesn't answer. 5 a.m. I drift again, lifted to resentful wakefulness by the ebbing of my tide. I am floating rudderless. My traitor hormones shipped their oars too soon. I thought I'd navigate these waters later. Lying in street lamp yellow dark, buoyed up by my insomniac body, I strain my eyes and wish for stones. Wrap my arms around my ribs, my hips, rock my bone cradle towards the morning. So this next poem is based off a reimagining of my favourite Shakespeare character, who is Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing. And if you weren't forced to study this play in an English secondary school education like I was, she's great, she's brilliant, she's clever and funny and very sarcastic, and probably a bit too clever for her own good in the context of the time. And she also has what I consider to be the best line in Shakespeare, which is when her young cousin has been left at the altar because somebody has lied about her sleeping around. And of course they've believed the man instead of her. And Beatrice is raging about the unfairness of the world. And she says, "Oh God, if I were a man, I would eat his heart in the marketplace." And so I sparked the poem off that. And for context, this was written on the day that they acquitted Kavanagh of the sexual assault charges. So there's a little bit of that energy coming into the poem. And it's called #Beatrice 2018. I confess, it was a surprise to me too. It's not my usual style. I prefer the subtle approach, you know. The pen is mightier than the sword. Not that I was ever allowed a sword. And I know I have a sharp tongue, so sharp I'll cut myself, they say. And yes, I tend to use men as a whetstone, but can you blame me? Really? I hear them talking about me, whispering behind my back, muttering in corners, but never gossiping, no, because that's what women do. Men talk. Their tones are serious. Their words hold weight. are heavy enough to sink a girl like stones. Our voices are light, easily muted when we become too loud. Our unimportant words become unrecorded history, just another scrap of collateral damage. And they call us gossips, while their tattle tongues flick lies spit slander at my sisters. And they call us whores, while they use our spread legs like a ladder, climbing up to validation. They say that I'm a bitch. I better put a tighter bridle on my scold's tongue. Honey, they say, there's no need to get upset, it's just a joke. Like your anger is. And you know how some girls can cry and still look beautiful? Yeah, well, you're not getting any younger, so why don't you smile more, talk less, be less? See, that's the problem. I always talked too much, thought too much. I used to be a cookie cutter girl, gingerbread doll, everyone wanted a nibble, till I grew up, grew out, grew too much for this woman shape I lace myself into every day. I pull my unruly flesh into acceptability, my unruly hair into neat compliance, dip my tongue in sugar glaze, and still it's not enough for them, for me, for years. So, can you blame me if I let it slide one time, knowing what I know? Watching them load their lies around our necks, how could I stand and watch? My silence would have been another stone. So yes, I confess, I caused a scene. It's not really what you expect to see, a spot of casual cannibalism outside Superdrug. I ate his heart, but don't call me mad. I saw the look in their eyes. The men, as they passed, looked shocked, looked away, but the women, they looked hungry. Passed me water to wash it down, asked me how it tasted. Sour, I said. Salty. I guess I just grew tired of sweetness. This next poem is called Solastalgia, which is a neologism, a new word, a made-up word, as all words were made up once, but this one is very new. This is 2004, made up by an environmental philosopher, and it means a feeling of despair as one's home environment changes. These next few poems are going to be dealing with loss and grief in various different forms and reactions to change, and ultimately, hopefully, ending on a slightly cautiously hopeful note, which I think we could probably all do with at the moment. But then, yeah, here you go. Solastalgia. Language is important. It delineates our thoughts, allows us to separate the blur of feelings precisely. While most words remain academically aloof from their meanings, others are haunted by them. Listen to the sea cave sound of boom, the licked lips of moist, the way that claggy cements itself to the roof of your mouth like peanut butter. I was a bookish child. Chased new words like butterflies, discovered them pinned into novels in my local library, crept up on them as they fluttered round the edges of adult conversation, skittishly avoiding my easy comprehension. I learned a new word the other day. Endling. The term has overtones of Tolkien. The suffix ling makes it sound cute, as well as fantastical. It is neither of those things. It means the last, the only, the one that is left a temporary reprieve, a breath before the wave of extinction breaks upon a species. I roll it between my lips, this loneliest of words. Taste its ashes, draw out its ghosts. We're clever little animals, us humans, always dreaming up new tricks, curious, just to know what will happen if we take this, make this, break this. Tongues always ready to wring meaning out of sound and pin it down, skewer the heart of it, mouths crammed but always opening for more and more and more. In the end, I imagine we'll go noisily, careless of our neighbours, as usual. We'll describe our journey in minute detail, map each new increment of our grief, point to each lost thing and name it, and leave words in the spaces where the creatures were. So these last couple of poems are about grief and change and loss and adapting to that and moving through into something different, which is probably quite relatable at the moment. They're more page poems than performance pieces, so I'm going to read you them and I hope you like them. This first one is called After the Funeral. After the funeral, my grief and I come home. We eat toast with peanut butter for the protein, drink tea and boil the kettle dry watching the steam. We sit on the sofa, which is too small for both of us. I read, grief fidgets until I stop. I take my grief to the park. The field is mud. The mud is licked with bright new grassy tongues. In the ornamental bed we kneel among crocuses. I plant my fingers, whisper, tell me how it feels to root, to hide a portion of yourself inside the earth. On weekends we go walking to the river. Our kicked stones cause ripples. Our tongues turn minnows into whales. My grief points out a kingfisher, a brief blue lantern, flashing like a siren, or maybe a lighthouse. I take my grief to the beach and leave it huddled on the blanket with my clothes. Breath locked behind my teeth, I count down into mute submersion. Let myself be rolled between the palms of sea and sky. My grief comes down to the harbour side. We play which boat is mine. I want them all. Imagining bite-sized mornings delivered through portholes. When we leave, I'll take the helm while grief casts off. It's good at ropes and knots. The making, the undoing. My grief grows shabby. Edges smoothed by touch. Eventually it fits in my back pocket, this curled up, sharp-toothed stub. I try to remember to check before sitting down, and pockmarked by all the moments that I forget. So this is my last poem, and it's called 1 Year Waning. And it ends on a slightly hopeful note that I think we probably could all do with. So here you go. The first year is almost over. Unzip it like a shift dress. Shrug it off. Let it fall. It's too small for you now. When it puddles around your feet, step out carefully. Despite everything, you're still soft and should beware sharp edges hidden in the folds. Sometimes it peels easily, but there are times it will swaddle you. Cling, guilt, sodden, then you will use teeth, nails, blunt instruments. This will not be pretty. Still, we do what we must. Pick up the scraps. You may need them later. You will pick stray minutes from beneath your fingernails for months. In bed of a new lover, you will shift uncomfortably, stale crumbs of memories pricking you beneath the sheets. Remember, the weight of love is always measured out in salt. Hoard your tears. Take the wet rags of the old year, lay them in the sun, scraped clean. You will pay your debt somehow. Swim through silt and brine. Inhale even as it fills your throat. Trust in evaporation. Time and light will crystallise you too. Thank you for listening, and thank you to the Saboteur Awards for inviting me, and hopefully one day we'll all meet in person, back when the world is as normal as it ever is. So take care and stay safe. See ya.